Hi everyone. I'm going to rudely interrupt your conversations if that's all right. My name's Mark, I'm the vicar here. If we've not met, I'd love to meet you and come and say hi afterwards. As many of you will know, over the last few weeks we have been on this series where we've been tracking through this whole concept, this idea of revival and what it means for us as individuals and us as a church to be revival ready. And so 3 weeks ago, we talked through what that looks like in the context of our finances, what it looks like for us to be, sort of like contending for a move of God with our generosity, with the things that God have given us, what it looks like to give that back to Him in faith that that's going to do something in and with and through us. And then 2 weeks ago, we had Josh Green from Gen Z come and speak to us, and he really, I feel like, sort of prophetically lit a fire under us around what it means to be a church contending in prayer. If you didn't listen to that, it's available online. Please go and watch it, because it's a really significant moment for us as a church where Josh sort of, challenged us not just to pray for the stuff that we want, but this idea of contending for God to move, as in not shutting up until He moves. And then last week we had Paul, a member of our congregation, who it just so turns out is an expert on revival, has written 7 or 8 books on revival, including 2 specifically about revival in Manchester. And some of the, again, please go back and watch that, because they were just so good. But Paul was brilliant. And one of the most beautiful things from that was the fact that he was able to point literally to buildings within walking distance, including one that could be our next door neighbor to this building, where significant moves of God have happened in the past. And it felt like there was a raise of faith in the room. And it wasn't just asking God to do something new or do something different to what He's done before. There's just an element of we're just asking God to do what He's done in the same places again. And so we've just been really sort of challenged and pushed and stretched. And it's my job this week, this evening, to try and land this sort of 4 weeks of going through what does revival look like? What does it look like for us as individuals and as a community? What does it look like for us to be contending for this, longing for this, raising our expectations for this? But then also try to hybrid just acknowledge that we're a week away from Easter and we should land somewhere in the church calendar. And it's Palm Sunday. And spoiler alert, I hate Palm Sunday. Controversial? That was some anger. Almost entirely justified. I hate Palm Sunday. So let's dig into the text and then I can explain why. So we're in Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 to 11. If you don't have a paper Bible, we have some on these room dividers here. Please take it away with you. It's our present to you. Everyone should have a paper Bible in their life. We're going to put it on the screens as well. You can get it up on your phones. And it says this in Matthew chapter 21, as they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie," I had to Google that, it's a small donkey, apparently. "Untie them and bring them back to me. If anyone says anything to you," which would be a justified thing to say, "Why are you stealing my donkey?" and it's small donkey, "say that the Lord needs them." Please don't use that as justification to steal a car or something. And he will send them right away. So it worked. This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. "Say to daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven." When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowds answered, "This is Jesus. This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." I wonder if you have ever had a moment where something has not turned out quite as you expected it to turn out. I wonder if you've ever had, one of those moments in your life. One of my most favouritely treasured moments like this was me and my wife particularly, and before we had kids, really enjoyed diving, and we had a couple of holidays where we'd been diving, and we were in Thailand, I think it was, and we were doing some diving there, and we're both pretty adventurous, but sort of on the spectrum. I'm quite far that end if that's like really adventurous. And Joe's still quite adventurous, but probably a little bit less so than me. And so when you go to like a dive place, there's like this map of all the things that you can go to. And Joe will look and will go, ooh, Mark, like Coral Cove and like Boulder Island and, stuff like this, or like Ray Heaven. And she's just like, all of those sound lovely, let's go to those. And I'm like, Shark Point and Wreck, or even the one that I've never managed to convince her to do, the night dive. I just think that sounds absolutely brilliant. She's just like, I can't even see what's about to eat me. I was just like, well, does that not make it easier? Less scared. Anyway, still not been able to get her to do the night dive, but I did manage to meet her in the middle, and so we were going to do a wreck dive. And to do this, we had to like level up our qualification a bit. So they gave us this little manual, and when we read all the stuff and we watched the video and we did the online test and we passed the online test, and one of the most significant things it said in like big bold writing in the manual was never go into the wreck, which I mean seems like common sense, but anyway, it said it in big bold, and then it was tested in the test. What should you not do in the wreck? Go in, click, tick, win. And so we did that. And it said if you'd go anywhere near the wreck, or just if you're going on a wreck dive, you should also wear like protective, like gloves and booties and like a hat, because wrecks are sharp, because they're metal, and because the metal's been eaten by little sea things, and so now it's like really sharp metal. So like the headlines from all of the stuff: don't go in the wreck, don't touch the wreck, wear protective clothing. And then before you go on your dive, you have a chat with the dive master who's going to do the dive. We had this lovely French guy who I can't remember his name, but he was super lovely. And he was like sort of like diving like Yoda, because he'd done like 1,500 dives in his life. And so he was just like, he was brilliant. And I'm going to attempt a French accent because it adds to the story. It did become like other accents earlier, which let's, anyway. And so he's doing our brief beforehand, and he gets a little map of the thing up, and he gets about halfway through and he goes, so when we go in the wreck, and Joe straight away is just like, but the book said, do not go in the wreck. And he's just like, oh yeah, but it's fun in the wreck. And she's like, no, like the book's, and even the test asked, never go in the wreck. And she's like, yeah, I know, but it's so good in the wreck, you can see all these things. So literally just like, oh my life. So then like Joe goes, so we're gonna get like the gloves and the boots and the hat and all of this? And he goes, no, we just have good buoyancy. And he's just like, well, no, that's easy for you to say, because it's literally your job. Like him in the water is like, I'm still. Whereas like me, every time I breathe, I'm like up and down and up and down. So I'm like, that in the wreck, I'm gonna hit all the wreck bits and get covered in wreck. Anyway, so we're petrified going down. We do go in the wreck. Joe, you can see, is like breathing like twice as much as she normally does. And we sort of have it, like, it is magical, he is right. And that's probably why he has his job. It was super awesome. Loads of wonderful things in the wreck. We went in, we could see the outside all the time. We were on the inside, which I think helped. And then while we were down there, like the dive people like to show you the stuff around, and like they get very excited about certain types of fish. And so there's a number of times where he was like, and we're like, which one was that? I can't remember. We can't talk because of the mouth, but like, which one? And it's just like, what is this? And you I remember that when we get to the top, this one. And then later, he went, I was just like, oh, I've never seen that one before. I mean, he did that one, like the one we did yesterday, but this one I've never seen before. And he was like, this one, and no. And I was like, okay. So anyway, we get to the top, having, not been, sort of cut by the wreck or stranded inside the wreck and all the fears and all of this. And we're just like, oh, Mr. French guy, whose name I've forgotten. What was this one? And he's like, oh, it's the scorpion fish. I was just like, oh, great, they're really cool on there. Yeah, but like pretty poisonous. And I was just like, oh, okay. So he's like, what happens if you get stung by a scorpion fish? He's like, oh, we bring you to the surface, and then we pour the bleach on the, and then like normally you are okay. So normally, okay, like great, okay. And like Joe's just like, what have we done today? This is ridiculous. And then we're just like, well, what was this one? And he's just like, oh, it's the stonefish. I was like, what? You mean like an actual stonefish? And he's like, yeah. He's like, did you see the stonefish? And he's like, well, no. So it turns out there's an animal, which should be one of my first questions for God when I get to heaven. There is an animal that is the top 5 most poisonous animals in the world, that is camouflaged to look precisely like a legit normal stone. So he's there somewhere. If you find the eye, you can then find him. So the whole time, this dive master had been like one of those rocks can kill you. don't go near us. I wish I had my neoprene booties on now. So we're just like, oh, so Mr. Frenchman, what happens, if someone's been stung by a stonefish? And he's just like, oh, so we bring you to the surface? And I was like, oh, do you do the bleach? He's like, no, we just say bye-bye. And he's just like, great. This had turned out different to how we had expected. And I think for me, this is the most articulate analogy that I can give for my attitude to Palm Sunday. I really don't like Palm Sunday. I really don't like Palm Sunday because as a Christian, I grew up in a Christian home, and we would go to church, sort of around, the Easter time. We go to church all the time, but around Easter time. And Palm Sunday always used to be this like big victorious thing where it's like, yeah, Jesus, Hosanna, something you'd wave these little crosses, or sometimes if someone was trying to be like really impressive, they'd bring like real palm branches in, and you'd be like palm branch, or you'd make them in kids group. I've got a palm branch, and then sometimes you'd even go outside of the church and be like, Hosanna, like Jesus is here, isn't this great? And the problem is it just brutally exposed just the reality of my life and my relationship with God. This whole story of the whole week of Easter, it starts with all these people going, yeah, isn't he great? Isn't he king? Isn't he wonderful? And then by the end of the week, they're screaming, crucify him. They're screaming, we don't agree with who he is. Like all of that, we were completely wrong. He's someone completely different. It's better if he doesn't even exist anymore. And when I'm completely honest with myself, which doesn't happen particularly often, but when I'm completely honest with myself, I'm just like, that's my faith. That's what I do so much of the time, is that I'm all in on God when it's easy and when it's happy and when it's simple. But actually when the rubber hits the road and it's difficult, sometimes I find it so hard to stay true to the stuff that he's called me to be. And that's why I struggle with Palm Sunday, because it just reveals the hypocrisy in my own heart. So I'd love to talk to you today around this word that's just been going around this church. Whenever we pray, it just seems to come up over the last few weeks and months, this word surrender. And I'd love to talk to you under the title, Surrender to the Adventure. Surrender to the Adventure. This narrative that we get is, they're making it's so clear what is going on and what all these disciples and all this crowd, are saying is going on. This act of taking off your coat and laying it onto the floor was something that would have happened in the ancient Near East, in that culture that they existed in again and again and again. It would have happened for very particular moments. It would have happened basically for conquerors and for kings. And so we've got some photos of like modern day examples of conquerors and kings. So conquerors, the best example for that would be a football team that have won something notable. Apologies for the choice of football team, not actually apologizing. But I realize that the context, given we're in Manchester, is probably a bit rogue. But this is the sort of modern day equivalent of like, someone has done something amazing and they are coming back with the trophy. So in the olden days, what they would have done, the generals or the army would have gone, they would have defeated some distant foreign power, and they would literally bring back the heads of state and like walk them through the streets while everybody lay down their coats for them to walk over, and they would, everyone would cheer, similar to a football team coming home with their coat. Or kings would be the other time that they would do exactly this. So again, we had a coronation recently and people lined the streets, and it would have been similar then, except literally again, they would have taken off the most valuable thing that they owned, their outer cloak, and they would have been happy for it to be trampled into the ground, into the dust, to get dirty and caught up and broken and damaged for the sake of honoring this, this person who had just been given authority over them. And there's another level to what's going on, because the palm branches were a shout out to a Hebrew festival called the Feast of the Tabernacles. And what would happen is they would build little huts basically out of these palm branches. And they knew exactly what they were doing, because in this feast they were celebrating two things. One, how good God had been at providing for them through all their years in the wilderness, for everything that was difficult. And they were also, in the context of that gratitude, looking forward to when, this is true, for when the king would return to Jerusalem. And so them cutting off these branches for someone they're saying is king and treating like a king, coming into Jerusalem, they're saying this is the person who we think is the Messiah. This is the person who we think has come to save us. This is the person who's going to make everything better. And so what they do is they get off their coat and they lay it on the floor and they let the donkey ruin it. The most expensive thing they own, they're like, you can trample that into the ground because I'm just so excited about who you are, who you've come to defeat, what you're going on. But the challenge that I have with this day in our sort of yearly Christian calendar is, and I know I've heard all the arguments, and there's probably some truth in them to an extent, but I've heard it preached so many times. It's like, oh, it's a different group of people from one week to the next. And yeah, there definitely was some people movement around that time. There would, the festival was going on, the feast was going on, and so there would be one group coming and one. But we know for certain, for absolute certain, that there are at least 12 people who a week later, the coat that Jesus had marched in on, they were now wearing while they were abandoning him. They were now wearing while they were denying that they ever knew him. They were now wearing while they dragged some Roman guards to come and say, this is the one who you're after. And I really struggle to believe that when Jesus stood there next to Pilate and looked out while the crowd shouted, crucify him, I really struggle to believe that some of the coats and cloaks that were being worn were not those that he had ridden over on the way into Jerusalem. I'm certain that loads of them must have been the same people. And so what does it look like for us today to be able to put our stuff down and then when stuff gets tough to not just pick it back up again and go at the very person who we were happy to lay it down for in the first place. So I wonder what that looks like for you today. I wonder what you've brought in here today, just carrying, that maybe God wants you to just lay down for him tonight. Maybe it's control. Maybe in the context of worship or when you're having a really great time, you say, yeah, God, I'm so up for you doing whatever you want with my life. I'm so up for doing anything that you call me to. And then actually maybe when the anxiety starts to creep up or stuff starts to get a bit more stressful, you're actually saying, oh, actually I'm not up for doing that thing. Or I'm not up for doing that thing. Or, as is so often said, I'll do anything but that thing. I find myself trying to dictate to God the stuff that I want to have control over. What does it look like maybe for some of us today to literally lay down in front of the coming King? I'm not going to seek to control my life. I'm going to surrender to your adventure. This next bit's going to be difficult because I recently dislocated my shoulder, and so the constant on and off is going to be fun. But maybe it's fine. Maybe for some of us, it's comfort that we literally have to take off and lay down at Jesus' feet. Maybe when we worship, as we sang this morning, it's really, it feels really powerful for us to say, you're worthy of it all. You're worthy of it all, for from you are all things, and to you are all things. You deserve the glory. Maybe we say, I don't care about my comfort. I don't care. You are worthy of it all, God. But then maybe when someone that we won't get into opinions about makes some tariff-based decisions and the stock market takes an absolute drop, maybe our attitudes towards generosity or sacrifice or being comfortable in the future, maybe that starts to take a real shift. And actually that thing of saying to God, you're worthy of it all, you can have it all, I want you to have everything. Maybe that causes us to want to pick back up our coat and put it back on. Maybe it's insecurity. This one's really tight, so I'm just going to wear it like a cloak, like they did in the ancient times. It looks silly, doesn't it? Sorry. Maybe it's insecurity. Again, we worship God when we say, you know who you've made me, you know me, I am who you say I am. It's insecurity. And we're able to lay that down in those moments. We're able to go, I'm so secure about, I know who you say that I am. I know that you're a good God. I know that you're for me. And then actually when the anxieties creep in when we're in those dark moments of the soul, when we're by ourselves and we're lonely, we start to listen not to what God says about us, but we start to listen to what the world says about us. We stop pitching for the life that God has called us to, and we start thinking that we have to appeal or please the world or people on social media or people who are close to us. Sometimes we can even get that relationship with God really nuanced, and we can fall for the lie that we're meant to be trying to impress him in some way. We have to work to earn God's favor. We've lost that security that he provides us with in that moment that we know for certain that we are his and that he is ours. Maybe it's insecurity that we need to lay down at his feet this evening. Maybe it's those things that we, if we're really honest with ourselves, we've tried to deal with, and maybe we've actually done some work towards, but it just still keeps cropping up. Still keep struggling. There's anger or lust or pride or greed or whatever. But if we're really honest, we talk a good game to others and sometimes even to ourselves, but I've not properly surrendered this. I've not nuked this so that the devil can't get at it. I've not really brought everybody that I could in on this so that it doesn't become an issue anymore. And maybe there's just a moment tonight just to say, I just need to put that down in front of the coming King this Easter. Actually, when I sing at church, hell's lost another one. I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. That we're actually believing that that's true. And that when it gets dark and we're alone or we're bored or we're angry or we're tired or we're stressed or we're anxious, and we just go back to those old patterns and those old habits, which is completely understandable because that's how brains work. But actually, is God calling us afresh to just really lay it down and not pick it back up again when it gets difficult? And then finally, and we're into our sort of more winter wear now for those cold days just outside Jerusalem. Not that there ever are. I feel very yellow. Maybe it's just your hopes and your dreams and your agenda. It's not that any of those things are bad things. It's not that God doesn't want you to have the absolute best life and life in all of its fullness. But I just wonder if maybe, like I have done so much in my life, you have this sort of language or this conversation with God that says, oh, you know what? You can have it all when I've got the spouse or the promotion or the thing or the finances that are secure, or I've got this great plan, God, and I want to do it with you. And again, that's fine. But it's about the order that comes in. And maybe there's just a moment that we have to have today, and we just have to say, you know what? All my hopes, all my dreams. It's fine for you to have hopes and dreams. But you know what? I surrender them. I lay them down in front of you, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, coming into Jerusalem to save the world. You can do what you want. And then when the poop hits the fan, I'm not going to pick that back up again and just say, I'm going to go my way and wait for you to have another donkey moment before I go all in again. There's this amazing passage that I adore at the start of the book of Joshua. The Israelites have been walking through the wilderness for ages, and finally the Lord reveals to this guy Joshua that it's time to go into the promised land. And he says, in Joshua chapter 3, verse 5, he says, Joshua, in response to being told by God, it's go time, let's go, he says this to the people, to everyone, consecrate yourselves. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Consecrate yourselves. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And consecrate basically means do this. Get off the stuff that's carrying you, that's creating a block between you and God. Take off the stuff that's getting in the way. Take off the stuff and don't pick it back up again. Get yourself right with God. And I love the tenses that are being used here and the language that's being used here. It's not consecrate, so it's not transactional, it's not consecrate, it's not sort out yourself, it's not consecrate yourselves, get yourself clean so that tomorrow God will do good things. It's not consecrate yourself and maybe God will do good things. It is God is going to do stuff, so get ready. And church, what we're seeing is God is moving in a way that he hasn't for at least one, if not two generations in this country. Young people are just spontaneously walking into churches. We mentioned about this, that we were going to go into this season about revival, and we mentioned some of the stories of what people are doing. And literally one of our students went and talked to our student worker, Pippa, that same week and said, "That's me, I'm revival. I've been invited for 2 years to come to church and I've never considered it. And then something in the last month, I just knew I had to be there." Came to faith that, within 2 weeks. God is doing something. So it's not consecrate yourself so that he will do stuff. He is doing stuff. So the question that I just want to pose to you tonight is just if there really was going to be a once in a generation, once in a century move of God in this place, in this church, in this country, if it was certain, if you knew it was going to happen, if I could somehow be able to convince everybody and myself that was definitely going to happen, what wouldn't you lay down in this moment right now? What sin wouldn't you confess? What amount of generosity wouldn't you move into? What hope or dream wouldn't you say, that comes second to my intimacy with you, my walk with the Holy Spirit? And I think it's not right for me to just be banging on about this in a way that people get to do on stages without acknowledging that this has to have a response from us as a church as well. It's not just an individual thing, and we've been really challenged by what we think God has been speaking to us over this season. So we've come up with a couple of bold decisions that we really think God is in this idea of what does it look like just to lay some stuff down to make sure we are focusing as much as we can on God. So the first one, this isn't passing the blame, it's definitely my decision, but the first one is we're not going to run out for this term. Instead, we're going to pray. So we're going to spend the exact same amount of time that we would doing Alpha. We're going to pray for 2 hours from 7 till 9 every Tuesday for an entire term. Joe Bright, who we all know and love, who leads worship so brilliantly most weeks. When we launched this church, because I knew it was something that I'm not naturally brilliant at pioneering, I explicitly asked him, can you not stop pushing me on prayer? And so that's one of his many jobs, and he's excellent at it. And he's had a real sense over the last few weeks, particularly the week that Josh Green came to talk to us, that God was calling us to lay down one of our big things so that we could just contend in prayer for our city. And so you don't have to have any qualification. You don't have to think that you're any good at prayer. You don't have to think that that's one of your gifts. It's definitely not one of mine. But we are going to be here, and we would love you to join us 7 till 9 here in this room. We'll structure it somehow so that it's not just like 2 hours of prayer, because I don't think I could do that. And I'm sure all of you could. You're all brilliant. But that's what we're going to do. The second thing that we feel really called to do, and I've mentioned this a couple of times already, is we're not going to launch any new discipleship-based groups this term. I know we've been having these sort of relapsing and remitting groups that we've been doing for the last few terms, and some of our sort of outward-facing groups like Bridge the Gap or Run Club and stuff like that will carry on. But what we're going to be doing, again, through no ability of my own or really anyone on the staff team, we've got a beautiful, amazing man in the congregation called Chris Wadibia. He came and talked a few weeks ago. He is a theologian that has trained everywhere, and on account of that has all the friends in the world. And he's basically convinced a load of his mates to come and speak 1 week after another on Thursday nights, 7 till 9. It's all at 7 till 9, which makes it really easy. But just have a look at this lineup. It is so exciting. These are some top-level, best in their field theologians that are going to come and for 8 weeks over the summer term just feed in to us. So again, this is just a moment of us saying, God, I want to behold you. I want to understand more about you. I want to have a deeper relationship with you. So it's not just about us as individuals. I think it's us as a church as well. It's time for me to come into land. But to sort of come into land on this sort of 4 weeks of looking into this topic of revival, I've been trying to ask the question, what is God calling us as a church to in this season? Who is he calling us to be? What is he calling us to do? And I heard this amazing story a couple of weeks ago about a jazz concert in a German city in 1975, and I think this might be what God is calling us to. On the 24th of January 1975, in a town called Cologne in Germany, Keith Jarrett, who was a very famous jazz pianist at the time, was due to play a gig. And the gig was organized by a 17-year-old girl who was an aspiring music producer who was addicted to jazz and whilst also part-time finishing off her school. And she was just so excited to do anything that she basically hustled this event. And it's turned out to be one of the most chaotic jazz concerts of all time. It just gets better and better and better the more that you read it. She went to the local opera house and said, "What times do you have?" And they said, "The only dates and times we have is this day after the opera at 11:30 p.m., which I'm not a jazz expert, but I'm fairly sure is a rubbish time for a jazz concert. 1,400 people, complete sellout, were booked, and she was going to get some recording equipment in as well so that then she could sell the CDs afterwards. So she's all set it up and she's all got going, and then Keith arrives, and he was supposed to fly in because his rider said that she had to pay for his flight because he's a broke musician. He sold his plane ticket for money and got in his producer's Renault 4, and they drove 350 miles. And because he's a professional pianist, he had a back that didn't work already, and it really didn't work by the time he got out of the car. He also had problems with his digestion, and so he'd thrown up a few times and was just generally feeling rubbish. So he was really not very impressed when he arrives at this big event that's going to happen, where he's going to get recorded, and he finds out that the Bosendorfer super awesome classical grand concert piano that he was meant to have, actually two stewards at the venue had instead picked out a different Bosendorfer, which was a baby grand that was used to practice on. And in his very polite words, which included some non-polite words, was an inadequate instrument. So he outright says, "I am not playing on this." And Vera begs him to play. "You've got all these people coming. We're going to record it. Like, you, please, could you just consider playing?" He's like, "I am not going to play." He's like, "Well, let's just do a deal. I'll try and get this tuned up so it sounds a bit better. I've booked you a restaurant. Why don't you go and eat, and then we can chat further." So he's just so annoyed, but he's just like, "Fine, I will do this." He goes to the restaurant. To be fair, it gets worse for him. They don't actually bring his food out for 2.5 hours, and he has 10 minutes to eat his food. He eats it too fast, he then throws up again. So like that bit ends badly as well. While all this is happening, Vera hustles. She finds a tuner to come and tune the piano. At the same time, she finds a piano on the other side of the city and says to the tuner, "Could this work?" And he says, "No, it won't work, because a piano that nice, while it's raining, while it's cold, you won't just like knock it out of tune. You will ruin it forever if you try and do this at this moment." So he tries to get this piano tuned up as well as it can. During this time, he feeds back some of the issues with the piano. The high notes are too high, too jangly and high. The low notes don't do low. There's no bass in them. And the sustain pedal doesn't work at all, which apparently is a thing. Yeah, it helps. And the other two pedals barely work. And so Keith arrives back, having thrown up again his meal that he desperately wanted but couldn't keep down, with his bad back and his grumpiness, to this inadequate piano. And Vera begs him to play. So he plays. And he uses all his genius to do 2 hours of improv jazz. And because of the limitations of the piano, he sticks to the middle register rather than the top and the bottom. And he somehow understands all the limitations and weakness of this instrument that he's working with, that he's able to make something that's not just good enough given the circumstances, that it's deeply beautiful in itself. And it's not that it's easy. Apparently on this recording, you can hear him swearing at the piano multiple times. There's a moment when where the opera house, because they weren't used to having gigs at this time, they play their chimey thing that goes when they want everyone to come in during the middle of his set. But he riffs on that chime for 20 minutes and is one of the most iconic bits of the set. The Colne Sessions by Keith Jarrett is the highest selling solo jazz piano album of all time by a country mile. And I heard this story a couple of weeks ago at an event for a load of church leaders. And it was one of these, super high functional, really well-rounded psychologists / motivational speakers. You all know the type. He was great. Trying to say nice, encouraging things to us. And he's just like, you've got to be more Keith. You've got all this difficult stuff, and you have to hustle, and you have to stretch, and you have to work out how to do all this sort of stuff. And but Keith did it, so you can do it. And then did that thing that really good speakers like this will do. And it's like tell me what you think. Come back at me. Argue with me. And this one amazing person who's well known to be just a fabulous human being, she put her hand up at the back, and they brought the mic round to her, and she said, I don't want to be like Keith. I don't think I am Keith. I think I'm Vera, and I think I'm called to be Vera. I'm called to believe that there is someone brilliant who can come and use all of this brokenness and make something completely profound and beautiful happen as a result of his brilliance. I'm called to beg him to come and move, to beg him to come and play, but beg with the belief that if he did, it would be marvelous. I'm called to be that person who knows how good the ultimate musician is. And so I think we're called to be Vera. I think we're called to contend with all that we have for God to move, knowing that what could happen if we pray hard enough, not that it's transactional, and we've dealt with that in the last few weeks, but if we pray hard enough, if we unify intensely enough, then something beautiful could happen, not because we've done anything, but because he's amazing and he wants to move. She didn't wait for an opera house that had a suitable time slot. She didn't give up when the piano wasn't the right piano. She's like, we can make this work because he's amazing enough. So what we're going to do, friends, tonight now is we're just going to take a moment, and actually I feel really led, and we did it this morning. I think we should just share communion together. There's something beautiful about communion, particularly when it talks, when we are in the season of thinking about laying stuff down, in this moment of just reflecting on what Jesus did on that Good Friday gives us an opportunity to look at both our past, our present, and our future. We can give our past to him, all of our regrets, all of our shame, all the things we wished we hadn't done or said. We can give it to him. We can give our present to him, all of our anxieties, all our fears, all our worries. And we can give our future to him, all of our hopes, all of our dreams, all of our agenda, all of the stuff that we want to happen, all the stuff that we're scared doesn't happen. And it all gets caught up in this moment of the cross. And I would just love you to just ask God to tell you what the thing that he wants you to take to that moment of you taking the bread and wine, just this symbol of that amazing sacrifice that he made, what it is that he wants you to bring, what it is that he wants you to lay down, to really lay down. And so what we're going to do, we're going to share communion. We've got some very simple words that we just go through very quickly. And then actually, I don't know if this is legal, but we're going to do it anyway. We're going to do communion at the back. And then we're just going to leave the front for just anybody who, in the context of having taken communion, just wants. We've done a lot of kneeling as a church in the last few weeks, and I just think there's something in it. If you just need to come and you need to sit or kneel or stand at the front, just as a way of saying, God, I want to lay this stuff down, and you're going to have to help me if we're going to do that.